Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a moment in every woman's life when she finally realizes she doesn't have to beg to be chosen, chase to be valued, or shrink to be loved. And that moment changes everything. Because the second you stop bending for someone who took your presence for granted, you become the one thing no man can forget. The moment you reclaim your power, you become the woman he thinks about at night, compares everyone to, and finds himself wishing he had treated better. If you truly want to know why men always return, listen closely. This is the part they don't want you to understand. Ladies and gentlemen, if only you knew the power you hold when you stop chasing validation and start stepping into the version of yourself that makes a man sit up, rethink everything, and wonder how he ever let you slip through his fingers. There is a certain kind of energy a woman can embody that doesn't demand attention, doesn't beg for affection, and doesn't audition for someone's love, yet somehow, effortlessly, magnetically draws it in. Men return to that kind of woman, not because she manipulates, not because she plays games, but because she becomes unforgettable. It begins with the moment you finally decide to reclaim yourself. When you stop living in reaction to his inconsistencies, his mixed signals, his moments of silence, and start living in response to your own worth. A man notices when you shift from anxious to anchored, when you're no longer gripping the relationship with fear, but holding yourself with confidence. It's the moment he feels the space that your self-respect creates, and suddenly that space becomes the thing he can't stop thinking about. Men return to a woman who is not waiting by the phone, not because she's cruel or detached, but because she has built a life that doesn't pause while he figures out what he wants. She fills her own world with purpose, friendships, joy, progress, passions that have nothing to do with him. And in doing so, she becomes the calm after his emotional storm. She becomes the place where he remembers who he was when he first met her, the man who wanted to impress her, earn her, and show up. When you stop revolving around him, you give him something far more powerful, the contrast that makes him realize how much he misses the gravity of your presence. But the real shift doesn't happen in your actions alone. It happens in your energy. There is something almost irresistible about a woman who no longer seeks permission to be herself. When you stop over-explaining, overthinking, and overgiving, when you stop trying to predict his reactions or tailor your worth to his moods, you create an energy of quiet certainty, and men are drawn to certainty in a world full of noise. He feels it when you walk into a room with your shoulders back and your heart open, not because you're trying to get his attention, but because your life is bigger than him. He feels it when you're kind, but not desperate, warm, but not self-sacrificing, available, but not waiting. It is the paradox of desire. The less you need from him, the more he wants to give to you. Men return to a woman who knows how to communicate without pleading. A woman who can say, "I care about you, but I won't diminish myself for you." That kind of clarity is shocking to a man who's used to being the center of someone's emotional universe. When you express your needs without fear, your boundaries without guilt, and your feelings without chaos, you become someone he can respect deeply. You become the woman who invites him to rise instead of sinking to match dysfunction. Confidence spoken calmly is unforgettable. Another reason he comes back is because you no longer try to fix him. He feels the moment you stop trying to be his healer, his therapist, his savior. When you release the burden of rescuing him from his own patterns, he finally confronts himself. And in that confrontation, he often realizes what he lost when he lost you, a woman who believed in his potential but refused to sacrifice her sanity to prove it. You offering him space, not punishment, not anger, just space, becomes the mirror he needed, and that mirror is what pulls him back. But perhaps the most magnetic quality of all is emotional maturity. You don't try to make him jealous. You don't start dating someone else as a performance. You don't send cryptic texts or punish him with silence. You simply detach with grace. You focus on healing your own heart instead of trying to create regret in his. Ironically, that's exactly what creates the regret. Because maturity stands out. In a world full of reactive behavior, drama, and game playing, your calm integrity becomes the rarest commodity of all. Men return to a woman who left with dignity. Not slamming the door, not setting fire to the bridge, but simply deciding she deserves better than inconsistency or confusion. There's something haunting about that kind of exit. Long after the chaos of his life settles, long after the noise fades, he starts remembering the moments you made him feel understood, appreciated, seen. But this time, those memories are paired with a sharp realization. You did not chase him, you did not collapse, you did not wait. And that contrast rewires something in his mind. Suddenly he's comparing every new connection to the peace you brought, the softness with strength, the kindness with boundaries. He remembers the version of himself that he liked better when he was with you. Men return to the woman who made them better, not through pressure, but through presence, a presence they took for granted until it was gone. Yet here is the secret that changes everything. The moment you genuinely stop caring whether he returns is the moment he is most likely to. Because men are drawn to self-sufficient women, women who embody the kind of inner world he wants to be invited into, not the kind he feels responsible for filling. When you detach not as a strategy but as a reflection of your self-worth, your energy becomes undeniable. You become the woman who doesn't beg him to choose her, because she already chose herself. You become the woman who doesn't collapse when someone leaves, because her life is full of meaning beyond romance. You become the woman who doesn't compete with others, because she knows there is no competition when you bring authenticity. You become the woman who doesn't chase love, because she knows love chases those who carry themselves with certainty and emotional wholeness. And here's the most powerful piece. You stop viewing his return as the victory. You begin to understand that the real victory is becoming someone so centered, so fulfilled, so aligned with her worth that whether he comes back or not is simply a detail, not a destiny. When you reach that level of wholeness, something shifts in the way you speak, the way you walk, the way you hold your heart. You stop asking, will he come back? And start asking, is he even aligned with the life I'm building now? And that shift is what pulls him toward you again, not to complete you, but to meet you. Men return to the woman who finally realized she never needed them to. And when you reach that point of emotional clarity, something remarkable happens. You begin to make choices based on truth rather than fear. You no longer entertain someone because you're afraid of being alone, and you no longer cling to a connection because you're terrified of starting over. Instead, you become deeply honest with yourself about what you want, what you deserve, and what you're no longer willing to tolerate. That honesty radiates from you in a way that becomes almost magnetic, because a woman who chooses herself without bitterness is a force that stays on a man's mind. As you grow into this new version of yourself, you notice that your energy starts to shift your environment. You stop overgiving to prove your value, and instead, you give from a place of abundance. You stop being the woman who bends to every whim, and start being the woman who chooses her boundaries, like a queen, calmly, clearly, unapologetically. Your boundaries aren't walls, they're filters. And those filters begin to separate the men who only want access to your time from those who genuinely want a place in your life. That shift alone is enough to make a man think about you differently, because he suddenly realizes he doesn't have free access to the version of you he once knew. He has to earn you again, and that challenge is something most men cannot ignore. You also become more attuned to your intuition, the quiet voice you used to silence whenever you wanted the relationship, more than you wanted the truth. Now you listen to it. You notice the red flags you once excused. You pay attention to the patterns you used to explain away, and instead of trying to negotiate with your own discomfort, you respect it. That self-awareness becomes a kind of spiritual glow that changes the way people interact with you. You're not harder or colder, you're simply wiser. Men feel the difference between a woman who is guarded and a woman who is grounded. The former protects herself from pain, the latter protects her peace. Peace is far more attractive. And as you evolve, you begin to see the beauty in moving at your own pace. You no longer rush intimacy, rush clarity, or rush connection. You give things time to reveal their truth, and you let people show you who they are without trying to influence the outcome. A man feels this shift profoundly because he realizes he can no longer rely on charm or chemistry alone. The only way to get close to you now is through consistency, transparency, and genuine effort. That's when he begins to understand just how rare you are. Because while the world is full of people seeking shortcuts to love, you've become someone who refuses anything built on shaky ground. You start pouring your energy back into yourself, your goals, your passions, your growth, your healing. You take accountability not only for what you allowed, but for what you're now choosing differently. This level of self-love isn't loud or performative. It's the quiet way you show up for yourself day after day. It's the way you protect your space, the way you rest without guilt, the way you nurture the parts of you that once felt neglected. When a man senses that you've become the source of your own strength, he can't help but feel drawn back toward the person you're becoming. People are attracted to growth, and your evolution becomes the gravity he didn't know he was orbiting. The confidence you embody now is not arrogance. It's alignment. It's the way you carry yourself, the way you make decisions, the way you speak with conviction without needing validation. You no longer chase reassurance from anyone because you've learned how to give it to yourself. That inner security becomes incredibly attractive because it creates a dynamic where love becomes a choice, not a dependency. A man is far more likely to return to a woman who chooses him from wholeness than one who needed him to feel complete. Wholeness has a pull that neediness never will. And as you continue rising, you begin to soften, not because you're weak, but because you've become strong enough to stay open. You let your heart feel without losing your self-respect. You express your emotions without drowning in them. You remain compassionate without becoming a doormat. This combination of strength and softness is what haunts a man long after he walks away because he knows he won't easily find it again. Most people can offer affection, few can offer emotional maturity. Most can give attention, few can give depth. Most can love in the beginning, few can love with intention. That is why you become unforgettable. You also become selective in ways you never were before. You don't accept every apology. You don't entertain every return. You don't offer unlimited chances. You've outgrown the version of you that thought love meant endurance. Now, to re-enter your life, a man must show you something new, something honest, something consistent, something real. And that requirement alone makes him rethink everything he took lightly before. When a woman raises her standards without raising her defenses, she becomes the catalyst for a man's transformation. Not because she demands it, but because her energy inspires it. He returns because he remembers the feeling of being around you, the peace, the challenge, the comfort, the chemistry, the emotional safety wrapped in accountability. But this time, he doesn't just want the version of you he left behind. He wants the woman you've become, the woman who learned how to walk away gracefully, how to evolve courageously, and how to rebuild beautifully, the woman who can offer love without losing herself, who can give without depletion, who can connect without clinging. A woman like that is a rarity in any lifetime. You become the kind of woman who lives in her truth so deeply that a man must meet you there or leave. You no longer shrink to make someone more comfortable. You no longer silence your needs to preserve a fragile dynamic. You no longer compromise your joy just to avoid conflict. You've learned that your happiness is not negotiable. And when a man sees that strength paired with warmth, he begins to feel something he didn't expect: admiration. Admiration often precedes desire, and both precede the realization of loss. He returns not because you waited for him, but because you didn't. Not because you made him jealous, but because you made yourself whole. Not because you lost yourself trying to prove your worth, but because you found yourself in the process of letting him go. Your growth becomes the echo he can't escape, the reflection he can't ignore, the reminder he didn't know he needed. And even if he returns, you're no longer the woman hoping he chooses you. You're the woman deciding whether he still deserves a place in your world. You're the woman who knows love is abundant, not scarce. You're the woman who understands that someone coming back isn't the reward. Your transformation is. You've built a life where someone must add value, not chaos. Where someone must contribute, not consume. Where someone must show up, not just show interest. This is the version of you that pulls him back. The version of you that glows from self-respect, radiates emotional intelligence, and stands firm in her worth. The version of you he didn't expect to emerge when he walked away. The version of you that is no longer waiting to be chosen, but choosing with intention. And that, more than anything, is what makes a man return, because the moment you become whole is the moment he realizes what he lost. And as you grow further into this version of yourself, something shifts so quietly, yet so profoundly, that you almost don't notice it at first. You begin to carry an inner stillness, a quiet confidence that doesn't need to be announced, defended, or performed. It's the kind of energy that makes people lean in, not because you're trying to impress them, but because your presence itself becomes magnetic. You start speaking less from insecurity and more from intention. You stop trying to convince anyone of your worth, because you finally understand that the right person will recognize it without being pushed. This shift becomes a powerful force in your relationships. You no longer chase potential, you evaluate patterns. You no longer cling to promises, you observe consistency. You no longer fall for chemistry alone, you look for character. This new level of discernment becomes one of your most attractive qualities, because it shows the world that your heart is valuable, selective, and not available to just anyone who shows interest. Men feel this deeply. They feel the shift from being chosen out of longing to being chosen out of alignment, and that shift shakes them in ways they rarely admit out loud. What makes this version of you unforgettable is the way you redefine connection. Instead of molding yourself to fit into someone's world, you begin to create your own world and invite someone to join you if they can match your energy. You build your life intentionally, your routines, your passions, your friendships, your solitude. You find joy in becoming your own source of fulfillment. A man sees this and realizes that you are no longer governed by the need to be loved, but by the desire to share love with someone who enhances, not diminishes, your life. That kind of woman becomes a turning point in a man's story. Your emotional depth becomes another magnetizing force. You stop running from vulnerability because you understand that vulnerability is not a weakness, but a strength disguised as softness. You allow yourself to feel, but not to fall apart for the wrong reasons. You communicate with clarity instead of chaos. You express with honesty instead of fear. This emotional mastery creates a sense of safety that most men crave but rarely encounter. It makes you memorable because emotional maturity is rare, and when a man experiences it, he doesn't easily forget it. And with emotional maturity comes a new relationship with time. You no longer rush healing because you understand that healing is not a race, it's a reclamation. You allow yourself to process, grow, learn, and rebuild at your own pace. You stop pressuring yourself to move on quickly just to appear strong. You understand that true strength is quiet, steady, patient. This patience with yourself transforms you into someone who values emotional integrity over emotional shortcuts. Men feel the difference between someone who is suppressing pain and someone who is transcending it. The latter becomes unforgettable. Then comes the shift in the way you handle your boundaries. They are no longer rigid walls designed to keep everyone out. They are flexible guidelines that allow the right people in and keep the wrong ones out. You stop explaining your boundaries excessively. You stop apologizing for them. You stop negotiating them for the sake of temporary comfort. Instead, you state them with calm certainty and let people decide whether they can respect them. A man quickly realizes that being in your life is a privilege, not a guarantee, and privilege must be earned. Your standards rise in ways that even you didn't expect. They are no longer just words you say when you're hurt. They become the blueprint for how you live. You stop accepting half effort, half love, half presence. You stop allowing inconsistency masked as confusion. You stop tolerating emotional crumbs disguised as potential. These elevated standards create a natural distance between you and anyone who doesn't actually want to do the work. And here's the interesting thing. That distance becomes the very thing that draws a man back. Not because you created it out of spite, but because you created it out of self-love. Men are drawn to women who don't break their own hearts just to keep someone else comfortable. Your independence deepens in a way that is beautifully balanced. You are not independent to prove anything. You are independent because you have learned to trust yourself. You know how to manage your emotions, your finances, your decisions, your dreams. You no longer seek someone to complete you. You seek someone to compliment you. That distinction is powerful. A man feels it instantly, and it changes the way he approaches you. Instead of taking you for granted, he feels the need to step up. Instead of giving you the bare minimum, he feels compelled to bring his best. Instead of drifting, he begins to pursue. You also begin to radiate a new kind of joy. Not the forced happiness you used to display when trying to hold a relationship together, but a genuine, grounded joy that comes from knowing you are exactly where you need to be. You laugh more freely because you no longer carry the weight of someone else's behavior on your heart. You look more alive because your energy is no longer leaking into situations that drain you. You appear lighter, brighter, more centered. This joy becomes a reminder to a man of what he lost, and what he could regain only if he chooses to show up differently. Your trust in yourself becomes another unforgettable quality. You stop second-guessing your intuition. You stop ignoring your inner warning signs. You stop abandoning yourself for a relationship. You finally understand that the moment you trust yourself, you stop fearing who stays or leaves. You know you can rebuild. You know you can rise. You know you can choose differently. This kind of self-trust makes you powerful in ways that captivate a man long after he has walked away. And then, without expecting it, you become the version of yourself that no longer needs a man to return in order to feel validated. You reach a point where you genuinely understand that someone coming back is not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of their realization. You stop romanticizing someone's return as a victory. Instead, you evaluate it. You observe it. You decide whether it aligns with who you are now. You stop seeing reconciliation as the goal and start viewing alignment as the requirement. A man returns because he sees what he didn't see before, the strength he underestimated, the confidence he overlooked, the softness he didn't know how to appreciate, the boundaries he never thought you'd enforce, the growth he never expected you to achieve. But the most powerful part is that when he returns, he doesn't find the same woman. He finds a woman transformed, a woman whose energy has shifted from longing to abundance, from attachment to alignment, from fear to self-trust. He returns because losing you made him realize something he couldn't see when he still had access to you. He returns because your evolution became the echo he can't silence. He returns because the new you reflects the version of himself he always wanted to become. He returns because you became whole without him. And that is the moment where the power lies, not in his return, but in your transformation.